All right. Hey, Justin, I'll pinch hit here for Jacob until we get that tech working. But I saw you sort of nodding your head in agreement with what Joe was saying. What resonated with you?
I think a lot of what Joe was talking about with regards to capitalizing on the opportunities in the last 12 months to actually innovate and grow is something we've thought a lot about. And I think Joe's exactly right that there were a lot of companies to move slowly in the beginning, not knowing exactly what moves to make, how to just keep their employees safe, how to keep payroll rolling, all of those sorts of things. Those were kind of first and foremost to shore up, figure out what your company was all about in this changed world. And then I think there were the smart companies figured out ways to actually innovate around it. And we've always been a technology-based company and have leaned very hard into it over the last few years. But I think as we've seen a changing world, and we know that fans are going to forever interact with venues a little differently than they used to. And what does that look like, and how can technology actually help support those efforts?
Okay, so do me a favor. Take me inside your boardroom. I'm the owner of Professional Team A. I call Justin Wood and Dimensional Innovations. I say, I need help. What are you hearing the most? Is it uncertainty? Is it complete guidance needed? What are you hearing from teams, and who are you hearing from the most?
I think it's I think there's a little bit of uncertainty, but I think a lot of it has to do with how to bridge the gap. The topic of conversation today is all about bringing fans back to venues, and I think all of us that are in the industry are hopeful that that's sooner than later, and we're optimistic that it's going to get back to some level of normalcy. But how do you bridge that gap? How do you avidity that you'd built over the years and keep them excited about the venue? We had two different venues we were working in this last year that had very unusual circumstances, and that was SoFi Stadium and Allegiant Stadium, both of which
well, let's just say SoFi is in LA and Allegiant is the Las Vegas Raiders Stadium.
Correct. Yeah. Both of them were presented with this opportunity to have these grand openings that were thwarted by COVID, and they now have a second new opportunity this coming season to have a second grand reopening. But how do you keep the sponsors engaged and super excited about their presence and their commitment to those venues and to those teams, knowing that you're going to have you had sort of a soft TV launch, but you're going to have a much bigger fan present launch coming this fall?
Well, do you get the sense that, at least from a sponsor's perspective, what I know is these are long-term deals. Yes, there'll be some make goods. Yes, there'll be some value add. But if you've got a partnership with a new building or pro sports team, generally not looked in small windows of time. How can we help each other? What's the symbiotic relationship over the course of a good number of years?
Yeah, no, I think almost all of them, you summed that up perfectly. I think almost all of them have thought about it in those kinds of terms. What does presence on camera and on TV screens look like this first year when there aren't fans or very limited fans? And then how do we build up the momentum so that when the fans do get to be in there this coming year, it's going to be amazing. And then, SoFi on top of that has the blessing of hosting next year's Super Bowl. I think there are a lot of the brands that are not only in the stadium, but also other brands that activate heavily around those kinds of events anyway, are really anticipating the opportunity to double down. LA is going to be an incredible experience anyway for a Super Bowl activation with the indoor-outdoor kind of lifestyle and the nature of that stadium. But I think long-term is definitely how they're all thinking.
If there is, and obviously awful, but if there is for a sports and entertainment industry, if there is any sliver of positivity from the pandemic, would you say that it's an accelerated timetable for technology, for innovation, and for presentation? The relationship between customer and team just seems as if that team certainly learned new things. We're willing to try new things because, hey, why not? and they found out what worked, and perhaps it'll be changed forever?
Oh, I think for sure. I think one
Give
of
me
the ways.
give me some examples then. What do you think has legs?
I think I think our expectations of experiences are going to be higher than ever before. I think experience really matter. It did before. It's going to matter more than ever before.
When you say experience, are you talking about my fanny in my seat watching, or are you talking about I want integrated ticketing concession? If I want the team to know that I want to park in section A, is it drone-aided parking? Is it robot security? What do you mean by experience?
I think all the above. Shervin.
Good for me.
Shervin talked about. Hi, Jacob.
Okay, sorry about that.
Talked about frictionless experiences, and I think our anticipation is that people will likely consume maybe fewer experiences than they did pre-pandemic, but that they're going to expect them to be fantastic. Little things like Instacart and Uber Eats, have changed our perception of how we should be treated, how we can have things, and I think we're going to expect those to be greater. I think technology is an extraordinary tool in venue to help with a lot of those things, whether it is for a frictionless buy-in experience at concessions or intuitive wayfinding, getting you to your seat and getting you in and out of the venue more quickly with shorter lines, or whether it's a fan activation, an experience that ties directly back to a sponsor spend that, because the technology just can allow for much, much greater throughput.
Yeah, anybody who's ever been to MetLife Stadium on a Sunday can know that ingress and egress is an issue. Take it away, Jacob.
Thank you. Yeah, and talking about tech, obviously some difficulties there backstage, but appreciate it, Scott. We only have a few minutes now at this point, but I want to kind of hone in on what you're talking about there, and you guys have developed experiences for ballparks and stadiums around the country. From the small to the biggest video walls you can imagine it. And I'm curious, what types of technology you guys have found have been proven to be winners with fans, and maybe when there is too much tech. I mean, how do you guys figure out that line there?
No, too much tech's a great conversation. I think we like to be solution agnostic in how we're telling stories, but at the end of the day, technology is just this extraordinarily versatile tool that allows us to make messaging super dynamic, and especially in multi-purpose venues, it allows it to be about the venue, the moment of the day. So we can be a football stadium on Sunday, and we can be an MLS stadium on Saturday, and we can host a concert on Wednesday, and the technology allows us to flip those platforms really easily. In terms of fan-facing technology, apps have been fantastic. They continue to be fantastic, but one of the byproducts of this pandemic is really interesting, has been sort of the resurgence of QR codes. Like if you've been to a restaurant, if you've been to a bar during the pandemic, there's no way you don't know what a QR code is and don't know how to use it. And it is something that I think we're going to start seeing more and more of in terms of fan experiences. When you go into a venue, a sponsor can have a QR-based experience that provides for a ton of versatility, ton of data collection and analytics, and doesn't compete with maybe the stadium or arena app, doesn't require you to opt in. There are a lot of cool things that come of it. I also think we're going to see less touch, as we would all expect. Less touch screens, more haptic-based, motion-based experiences, and more handheld device-based experiences.
Which is interesting, because tell me if I'm wrong, but to me, in the stadiums I went to, before last year, in the last few years, touch was, going up to a tablet and choosing, what video I wanted to watch, or that really seemed to be the touch point for a lot of my experience. So is that a pretty significant shift from where we were 2 years ago?
Yeah, and I bet those don't go away completely. My guess is those will come back to some degree or another. But there a whole lot of stuff can be done on your phone. We've got a partner in particular that we're working with at SoFi Stadium that it is all QR based, and then you can go up, you can take your picture, you can walk back to your seat, you can do it from standing in line at concessions, whatever, and have this really active engagement without touching anything. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So let's take to step back a little bit. for anybody that wants to learn a little bit more about dimensional innovations, the website, I believe, is dimin.com. You can see all the projects. We don't have nearly enough time to go in to all the work you guys have done. But if you wouldn't mind, just take one for an example, maybe what you guys did with the Vikings. And I'm just really curious to walk through, how do these conversations start? Do they start with the team, with the sponsor, and then how do they get built? And I'm most fascinated by how you guys kind of track and develop a continued experience.
Yeah, no, I think great question. Our engagements with clients are wide and varied. We work directly with teams, sometimes directly with sponsors, and then get introduced to the teams and venues, and then often work. We're working with Shervin's group on a couple of projects right now as well. So work with kind of owners, reps, and project developers as well. We typically take projects from beginning to end. But I think the best projects are the ones that the end isn't the opening day or ribbon cutting.
Mm-hmm.
They're the optimized experiences where you have enough technology in there to track whether or not your experience is doing what it's supposed to do. We promise partners, we promise teams that their experience is going to do this, and this. And if you're not measuring that in some fashion, there's no way to really know if you're doing that. And I think technology is a great way to do it. You mentioned the Vikings Voyage, the one inside the stadium. They have a couple of different experiences, but the one in US Bank Stadium is really cool because it's all driven by an RFID bracelet that you wear. Think kind of Disney Magic Band-esque, but it allows you to come back repeated times, and it lets the Vikings understand how a space is being used. This activation gets used 3 times more than this activation does, or people use this at halftime way more than they do pregame, or nobody uses this after third quarter. Those kinds of analytics are incredibly helpful, I think, for teams. If they're powered by a sponsor or funded by a sponsor, that's really valuable information to the sponsor to collect data and then be able to market with that.
And how much, I don't know if you guys can hear the fire truck going by outside here. How much have you guys evolved in that space? I was fascinated. I mean, you guys are using, depth models. You're using heat maps. I mean, the amount of tracking you're doing goes so much beyond, when I was a kid and I would go and throw a ball and see how fast I threw it and then go back to my seats.
Yeah, no, we're doing a lot of those kinds of experiences where we're figuring out different ways to track, whether it's, from simple as a person count using a space, dwell time on an activation, heat maps, as you mentioned. But really what we're looking for is a way to take real-time today data and the analytics around that, and then use that to ultimately forecast, as to be able to tell a team, you don't need this staffed after third quarter because nobody uses it, or hey, you need double the staffing pregame because this is how it gets used. And then ultimately our goal that we're working towards is development of what we can call an experience metric score, where we can be able to tell a partner across, if you had a Pepsi, for instance, that activated in 3 different venues, and they wanted to understand how their experience scored in AT&T Stadium versus SoFi Stadium versus somewhere else, we could be able to give them that metric based upon how their spaces get used. That's what.
And right now,
yeah.
What are the teams looking for? Are they looking just to get people in the door? Are they looking? What is kind of their goal as they bring in an advanced activation into a space?
I think right now that's a lot of the conversation. And I think almost everybody, Joe talked about it, Shervin talked about it, Stephanie talked about it. I think right now we want to get people back in venues and make them feel safe. All the data we've seen, all the conversations we've had, have really been about how do you communicate that your venue is clean and safe, and that you're going to do the right things, and that your visitors understand what to expect. I do think people are kind of getting over this, and they're trying really hard to move on, but they still need to have the communication that says, this is going to be a great and safe experience for you.
We have a question here from Lauren that I'm really fascinated by. People are pretty, a lot of people have been going to games for a long time. They've been maybe sitting in the same seat for decades. What do you do? How do you get them excited about using their phone to get to their seat, or using their phone, to go to the concessions, or using their phone to walk through the Hall of Fame? How do you get them excited and comfortable with the new ways of interacting with the stadium?
No, I think there are certain pieces of technology that are going to never be the same, such as the cashless arenas and stadiums. We were seeing some venues go in that direction even prior to COVID. So I think and ticketless. I think those sorts of moves are just inherent and they're going to happen whether fans like them or not. But I do believe that a lot of other experiences, like a Hall of Fame, you still have to have the static with the dynamic and with the high touch as well. The high touch with the high tech. I think there's got to be that balance, and people are not going to want to give up their Hall of Fame experiences and not want to still eat a hot dog, and those things are going to have to live still in some fashion. It's just maybe how you get there and having the option to do it a different way.
And at this point, we talked. I mean, there's really three parts of the equation as far as I see it when we talk about these things. It's the team, it's the fan, and it's the sponsor. So right now, a lot of businesses have been upended over the last year. A lot of businesses have changed direction. What is the sponsor interest in investing in these kinds of activations at this point?
I think the sponsors, what we're seeing from sponsors is they want to be able to collect information, and they want to be able to have meaningful relationships with teams and venues. I think the days of people writing a very large check, slapping their name on the side of a building and walking away are over. They want deeper, more meaningful relationships that tie to a fan base, that tie to a sport, that tie to a community, and to be able to tell those stories so that a fan can say, hey, I get why so-and-so's name is on this building, and I appreciate their funding. It makes sense. It's obvious why they're here versus somebody else, and they've made my experience better. I think that's what sponsors are looking for.
Hey, Justin, I'm so interested in this Pepsi experience score. I don't know if you're going to tell me which venue is better than the other, but can you tell me, just give me some guidelines. If I'm Pepsi, what can I do to get a better experience score in a venue?
I think we're still developing it, for one, but I think the ability to where we hope this goes is that you can take it from a single partner across multiple venues, and you can also do it across multiple venues, period, not just from a sponsor perspective, but from a fan experience perspective. We know each of the leagues measures fan experience, and they have a variety of different metrics around what stadium or arena or team is doing it best. But I think we're hopeful of this is something that can help drive sponsorship sales and improve ROI for partners.
Right. What's the coolest thing that, the far out Star Trek kind of thing? I'm hearing about heat maps. Fans, I don't think about that this is going on in the background. Obviously, with the increased desire for ROI from sponsors, like you said, it's not enough to slap a name anymore. Give me some of those cool things that are going on that I would have no idea about.
Oh gosh, let's think. I think the one of the things that I think is really incredibly exciting is, and got to be cautious how much of the story I tell here, but SoFi, I think, is a really interesting case study. SoFi Stadium and Hollywood Park, the entire district, and the way they have taken a very holistic approach to partnership and analytics around that, so that partners are not only getting the benefit of being partners in the district, but in the stadium, but they're also getting benefits of being partners in the district wide. So, we're seeing some of the named sponsors that you would recognize, all these names that are in stadium, are also having brick and mortar experiences or pop-up experiences in the district. For instance, a healthcare provider that might have a presence in the district, or a automotive partner that might have a presence in the district. It's just a much broader reach than I think what's typically seen in the partnership realm.
Okay, Jacob, why don't you hang out while we move on to the next group? Justin, thanks so much for coming. We do appreciate it. It's great stuff. Stuff I wouldn't even imagine that was going on, but I want to talk to you offline a little bit more about what you're doing. Fascinating stuff.
Thanks, Scott.